Okay, so before you come at me, let me just say that I'm not proud of this. Actually, I'm terrified to even write this down. If the person or thing hunting me finds this, I'm dead. But I can't keep it all in anymore. I need people to know how it started and how I ruined someone's life for 50 grand, all because I didn't think I had another choice. It all began 3 months ago when I was scrolling Reddit at 2 a.m. Big mistake, I know. I had this routine every night where I'd doom scroll until my brain finally decided to shut off. I'd hit up TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, the usual. It was like a nightly spiral. My life wasn't great, okay. It was a complete dumpster fire. My left knee was wrecked from an old sports injury, and I needed surgery to fix it. The kind of surgery that cost $45,000 minimum. And of course, my insurance didn't cover it because I was a freelancer. Basically, I was living gig to gig, editing YouTube videos for streamers who could barely remember to Venmo me on time. The pain was getting worse every day. It got to the point where I couldn't even stand long enough to cook dinner or walk to the Starbucks down the block. That's when I started looking for alternative ways to make money, quick cash. I'd heard stories about people selling stuff on the deep web, not drugs or weapons or anything like that, but like weird services, writing essays, designing shady logos, even being a pretend online girlfriend. I figured if people were willing to pay big bucks for stupid stuff, I could probably do something legal and harmless. So one night, after a couple shots of cheap tequila and way too much YouTube, shout out to Luna for making me think I could handle this, I downloaded a Tor browser. I'm not going to tell you exactly how I got on the dark web, don't try this, seriously. But after a few hours of fumbling around, I landed on a forum that looked like Craigslist's evil twin. It was just a list of jobs. Most of them were horrifying, like straight-up hitman for hire type stuff. I almost bailed right there. But then one post caught my eye. Looking for someone to plant evidence. $50,000, I hesitated. Planting evidence wasn't murder, right? It was just bending the truth. And $50,000 was more than enough to pay for my surgery and maybe even move out of my shoebox apartment. My brain went into overdrive, trying to justify it. You're not hurting anyone directly. It's just one job. Take the money and disappear. I clicked the post and a chat box popped up. My hands were shaking as I typed, "Still looking for someone?" The reply came almost instantly. "Yes. Do you accept?" I should have stopped there. I should have shut my laptop and never looked back. But the number 50,000 was all I could see. "What do I have to do?" I typed. The next message chilled me. "We'll send details. You'll plant the evidence exactly as instructed. Do not deviate from the plan. Failure to follow through will have consequences." I didn't sleep that night. Hell, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that little chat box blinking back at me. "We'll send details. Failure will have consequences." The word consequences repeated in my head like a bad song stuck on loop. I tried convincing myself I could still back out, that maybe this was just some troll messing with me. But then, at exactly 3 a.m., my laptop dinged. An email. It wasn't from Gmail or anything normal. It came from an address that was just a random string of letters and numbers. No subject line, no text. Just one attachment, a PDF. Now, any sane person would have noped out right there. But curiosity and desperation got the better of me. My hands were sweating so much I almost dropped my mouse. When I opened the file, my stomach dropped. It wasn't vague like I'd expected. It was very specific. There was a name, a photo, and a whole bio of the person I was supposed to frame, Jason Cartwright, a 38-year-old teacher from Michigan. He looked normal, just some guy with kind eyes and one of those awkward, forced smiles you see in school yearbooks. Married, 2 kids, no criminal record. I remember staring at his photo for a long time, trying to figure out why someone wanted to ruin this guy's life. Then I saw what I had to plant. It was a list of evidence, small, horrifying things I needed to leave at a location I'd be told later. A USB drive, a couple of printed out photos, and a crumpled napkin. They'd already arranged for these items to be delivered to me. The photos were the worst part. They weren't included in the PDF, but the description was clear enough. Explicit images. And the USB drive? They said it would contain evidence tying Jason to something absolutely disgusting. I wanted to puke. This wasn't just framing someone for stealing or tax fraud or something petty. This was the kind of crime that destroyed lives, the kind that made people lose their jobs, their families, everything. I slammed my laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. There was no way I was going through with this. I didn't care about the money anymore. I'd figure out some other way to pay for my surgery. Hell, I'd start a GoFundMe or sell plasma or something. But this was evil. I was about to delete the email when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Don't delete that email." I froze. The voice was calm, low, and mechanical, like it was coming through one of those voice changes you see in movies. "How did you get this number?" I whispered. "Doesn't matter. You accepted the job. Backing out isn't an option." "I didn't." "You did when you clicked on the post." The voice cut me off. "We're watching you, Alex." My blood ran cold. How did they know my name? "I didn't agree to anything," I shouted, my voice cracking. The line went dead. I spent the next few days in a paranoid haze, jumping at every sound. I blocked the email, deleted Tor, and tried to forget the whole thing. But it didn't stop. First, I got a package in the mail, no return address. When I opened it, I nearly screamed. It was everything they described in the email, the USB drive, the photos, the napkin. Someone had gone through with this whole plan, no matter how much I wanted to pretend it wasn't real. I called the police, but halfway through dialing, I stopped. What the hell was I going to tell them? That I got a package full of creepy evidence from some dark web psychopaths? That I was supposed to plant it on a random guy I'd never met? Yeah, right. I'd probably end up in jail myself. Then the messages started. At first, it was just texts. "Do your job." "Time's running out. Don't make us come to you." But then the photos came. Pictures of me standing in line at McDonald's, sitting in my car outside my apartment. Even one of me sleeping, taken through my bedroom window. I finally snapped when I got a text that said, "You're running out of chances. Plant the evidence or we'll plant something worse." I didn't know what they meant by something worse, and I wasn't about to find out. That night, I drove to the police station, determined to come clean. But as I was walking up the steps, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a video. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the play button. When I finally hit it, I almost dropped my phone. It was my little sister, Megan, tied to a chair, her face streaked with tears. A masked figure leaned into frame, holding a knife to her throat. "Do your job," the video ended. I stood there on the steps, shaking so badly I thought I might collapse. I wanted to scream, to run inside and beg the cops for help. But Megan's face wouldn't leave my mind. If they could find her, they could find anyone I cared about. The next day, I started the job. I didn't sleep that night. The thought of Megan tied to that chair, terrified, was burned into my brain. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that knife at her throat, and my heart would start racing all over again. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. I left her a message, trying to sound normal. "Hey, just checking in. Call me back when you can." But I already knew she wouldn't. The next morning, the details of my job arrived via another email, this time with a subject line: "Final instructions." The message was short, cold, and terrifyingly precise. Plant the evidence in the trash bin at Timberland High School before 4 p.m. Ensure it is found by faculty or law enforcement. Do not speak of this to anyone. There was no mention of what would happen if I messed up or if I refused, but I didn't need it spelled out. These people had my sister. They had me. Timberland High was Jason Cartwright's workplace. I Googled it just to confirm, and sure enough, his smiling photo was on the staff page under Social Studies. He was even named Teacher of the Year last year. Fantastic. Not only was I about to ruin some guy's life, but I was going to make sure the entire community thought he was a monster. I couldn't think straight. I was running on fumes, anxiety, and half a bottle of gas station coffee. The worst part was how normal everything seemed around me. I passed people walking their dogs, chatting in the Starbucks line, completely unaware of the nightmare I was trapped in. I wanted to scream, to grab someone and tell them what was happening, but every time I thought about Megan, I shut down. I couldn't screw this up, not if I wanted to keep her alive. I arrived at Timberland High around 3:30 p.m. The school was quiet, the parking lot mostly empty, except for a few cars belonging to teachers who stayed late. I parked a few blocks away and sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. The package of evidence sat in the passenger seat, taunting me. I hadn't even looked at the USB or the photos since opening the box. I didn't want to know what was on them. Knowing would only make this worse, make it harder to live with myself. I told myself, just do it. Get in, get out, and it's over. I stuffed the items into an old backpack, zipped it up, and pulled my hoodie tight over my face. I didn't want anyone recognizing me, just in case there were cameras. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. Inside, the school smelled like cleaning supplies and stale cafeteria food. It was that distinct school smell you never forget. The halls were eerily quiet, and my footsteps echoed against the polished tile. I felt exposed, like the walls were watching me. The trash bin I was supposed to use was in the teacher's lounge. The email had said it would be empty around this time, but my whole body was buzzing with paranoia. What if someone walked in? What if there was a janitor or a teacher staying late? I reached the lounge and peeked through the window on the door. Empty. Thank God. I pushed the door open, my hands trembling. The trash can was against the wall, just like the instructions said. I unzipped the backpack and pulled out the items one by one. The USB, the photos, the napkin. I didn't look at any of it, just shoved it all into the trash bag as quickly as I could. But as I reached down to zip the bag closed, I froze. There was something written on the napkin in red ink. "You're next." I stared at it, my brain stalling out like an old car. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Was it a warning, a threat, or just some sick joke? My stomach churned as I pushed the thought away. I couldn't afford to lose focus now. I needed to get out of there. I left the trash can exactly as it was and slipped out of the lounge. My legs felt like jelly as I made my way back to the exit. I kept expecting someone to pop out of nowhere, a security guard, a teacher, anyone, but the hallways stayed silent. When I finally made it outside, the cold air hit me like a slap to the face. I didn't stop moving until I was back in my car. I thought it was over after that. I'd done my part. I could only hope they'd let Megan go like they promised. But when I checked my phone, there was another message waiting for me. Stay tuned. That was it. 2 words that filled me with dread. I spent the rest of the night glued to my laptop, refreshing news sites and social media, waiting for something, anything, to pop up about Jason Cartwright. It didn't take long. By 10 p.m., his name was trending on Twitter. There were already articles about the evidence found in the teacher's lounge. Photos of him smiling with his family were plastered alongside headlines like "High school teacher under investigation for disturbing allegations." Parents from the school were posting angry Facebook rants. Someone even leaked the school's statement before it went public. Timberland High is fully cooperating with law enforcement and takes these allegations very seriously. It was surreal watching it all unfold in real time. One minute, Jason Cartwright was just some guy living his life. The next, he was being dragged through the mud by strangers on the internet. I tried to feel relief. Megan's safe now. It's over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Not really. And I was right. Because the next morning, I woke up to another package sitting on my doorstep. Inside was a burner phone. It buzzed the second I picked it up. "Good work," the voice on the other end said. It was the same mechanical, distorted tone from before. "I did what you wanted," I said, my voice shaking. "Now let Megan go." There was a long pause. Then, "We have one more job for you." I wanted to scream. My whole body went numb. "You said, fail, and Megan won't be the only one who suffers." The call ended before I could argue, and that's when I realized I wasn't just a pawn in their game, I was trapped in it. When I hung up, I just stood there in my doorway, staring at the burner phone like it might explode in my hand. My head was spinning. I'd done everything they asked. I'd planted the evidence. Jason Cartwright's life was already in flames. But these people, they didn't care. I was naive to think they'd let me walk away. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but another thought stopped me cold. Megan. I took a deep breath and sat down at my kitchen table. My apartment was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the walls were closing in on me. My palms were slick with sweat as I turned the phone over in my hands. It buzzed again. A text this time. "Meet us at 214 West Hollow at midnight. Bring gloves. Don't be late." I didn't recognize the address, but Google Maps told me it was a rundown warehouse on the edge of town. A real cliché, right? I thought about ignoring the message, about running to the police, but I knew they'd find out. They always knew. And Megan didn't have time for me to test their limits. By the time I pulled up to the warehouse, it was raining, because of course it was. The whole scene looked like something out of a bad movie. The building was old and crumbling, the kind of place you'd expect to find a body. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, and there wasn't a single streetlight. My headlights barely cut through the darkness. As I stepped out of the car, my foot sank into a puddle, soaking my sneaker. I shivered, pulling my hoodie tighter against the rain. The place was dead silent except for the occasional drip of water from the roof. The text had said midnight, but I was 15 minutes early. I wasn't about to make them wait and give them an excuse to punish me. I approached the rusted metal door and hesitated. For a second I thought about turning around, driving home, and pretending this never happened. But then I thought about Megan. I knocked once. The door creaked open almost immediately, like someone had been waiting for me. Inside, the warehouse was even worse than I'd imagined. The place smelled like mildew and motor oil, and the only light came from a single, hanging bulb, swaying slightly in the breeze. 2 men were waiting for me. The first guy was tall and wiry, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. His face was covered by a cheap plastic mask, the kind you'd get at a dollar store around Halloween. The second guy was shorter and stockier, but his face was bare. He had a scruffy beard and dead, sunken eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "Alex," the tall one said. His voice was distorted, just like the calls, but I could tell he was smiling under that mask. "Where's Megan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You do what we ask and you'll see her soon enough," he said. "Now shut up and listen." The stocky guy tossed something at me. I flinched, but it was just a pair of black latex gloves. "Put them on," the tall one ordered. My hands were shaking so badly it took me a few tries to get the gloves on. My throat felt dry and I could barely swallow. The tall guy nodded toward the corner of the warehouse, where I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A body. At first, I thought it was a mannequin. It was slumped against the wall, motionless and dressed in a dark suit. But as I stepped closer, the reality hit me like a freight train. It wasn't a mannequin, it was a man. He looked like he was in his 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a gash across his forehead. His face was pale, and his eyes stared blankly at nothing. I stumbled back, my stomach lurching. Is he dead?" "Not yet," the stocky guy said, his voice calm. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The tall guy stepped forward, holding out a knife, a long, serrated blade that gleamed in the dim light. "This is your second job," he said. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My legs were weak, my vision blurred, and my ears were ringing. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, I can't." "You don't have a choice," the tall guy said, cutting me off. "This man is a problem for us. You're going to solve it." I looked back at the body. His chest was barely moving, just enough to show he was still alive, but unconscious. My mind raced. Who was he? What had he done to deserve this? "I'm not a killer," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The tall guy crouched down, getting right in my face. I could see the faint outline of his eyes behind the mask. "You think we care about what you are?" he hissed. "You signed up for this the moment you took our money. Now either you do the job, or we'll kill Megan, and we'll make you watch." I don't know how long I stood there frozen. The room felt like it was spinning. I kept waiting for something, anything to happen, a SWAT team to burst in, a fire alarm, a miracle, but nothing came. Finally, the stocky guy grabbed my arm and shoved the knife into my hand. His grip was like iron, and the blade felt heavier than it should have. "Do it," he said. I looked down at the man on the floor. His breathing was shallow, his face slack. He didn't even know what was happening. My hand was trembling so badly the knife almost slipped from my grip. I can't," I whispered. The tall guy straightened up, towering over me. "Fine," he said. "Then we'll do it for you, and Megan will be next." That was it. That was the moment I broke. I don't even remember moving, but suddenly I was kneeling next to the man, the knife in my hand. My whole body was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I begged him to wake up, to move, to fight back, anything to give me a reason to stop. But he didn't. The knife sank into his chest, and I felt the resistance as it hit bone. When it was over, I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. My hands were soaked, and I could feel the warmth through the gloves. The stocky guy clapped me on the shoulder. "Good job," he said, like I'd just finished some mundane chore. The tall guy leaned down and took the knife from my hand. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll be in touch." And then they were gone. When I got home, I scrubbed my hands until they were raw, even though the gloves had kept them clean. The blood was still there, though, not on my skin, but deep inside me, under my fingernails, in my veins. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. And when I finally did, it wasn't a call or a text, it was a video. Megan tied to the same chair. But this time, the chair was empty. I think I know what's coming next. When I saw the video, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs might snap. The chair Megan had been tied to was empty now, tipped over on its side, and the room, wherever it was dark except for a single, flickering light overhead. The camera panned slowly, the sound of heavy breathing crackling through the audio. The frame shifted, and there on the wall, written in thick, dripping red letters, were 2 words. It's time. The video cut off abruptly, leaving me staring at a black screen and my own horrified reflection. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat, but I forced it down. I couldn't lose it now, not when they still had her. A second later, the burner phone buzzed again. Another text. Come home. My whole body went cold. I was in my apartment. Were they already here? I glanced around the room, every shadow suddenly feeling like it had eyes. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find for protection, a rusty screwdriver I'd been meaning to throw out, and crept toward the window. I peeked out, expecting to see someone watching me from the street. But it was empty. Just rain and darkness. The phone buzzed again. We said, "Come home." For a second I thought they might be mocking me, but then it hit me. They didn't mean my apartment. They meant my childhood home. I grew up in a little house in the middle of nowhere, about 2 hours from the city. After my mum died, my dad went off the rails and eventually just disappeared. The house had been abandoned for years, rotting away on a forgotten stretch of road surrounded by woods. I hadn't been back since I was 19. Now they wanted me to go there. I knew it was a trap. I knew that walking into it was probably the dumbest thing I'd ever do. But Megan was all I had left. If there was even a chance she was alive, I couldn't stay away. I left immediately, speeding down the rain-slicked highway, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. The entire drive, I couldn't stop replaying the murder in the warehouse. The man's lifeless eyes, the warm blood soaking through the gloves, the way my own hands had betrayed me. What would Megan think of me now? What would she say if she knew what I'd done? I shook the thought away. It didn't matter. All that mattered was getting her back. By the time I reached the house, it was almost 3 a.m. The place looked worse than I remembered, like something out of a haunted attraction at Universal Studios. The paint was peeling, the windows were broken, and the roof sagged in the middle like it was on the verge of collapse. The trees around it were so dense that it felt like the house was suffocating. I parked at the edge of the gravel driveway and sat there for a moment, gripping the screwdriver in my lap. My phone buzzed again. Come inside, alone. The door creaked open with the faintest touch, the hinges screeching like they hadn't been used in decades. Inside, the house smelled like damp wood and decay. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I stepped into the living room. That's when I saw it. On the coffee table, where my mum used to keep a stack of old photo albums, was a single Polaroid. My blood ran cold as I picked it up. It was Megan. Tied to the same chair from the videos, her face streaked with tears, her head slumped forward. But behind her, in the shadows, was something or someone wearing a black mask, the kind that looked more animal than human. It wasn't the same cheap mask from the warehouse. This one was intricate, almost ceremonial, with sharp, unnatural angles and deep, hollow eyes. There was writing scrawled across the bottom of the Polaroid in smeared black ink. "Find her!" I clutched the photo so tightly it crumpled in my hands. "Megan!" I screamed, my voice cracking. Silence. And then a creak. It came from upstairs. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get back in the car and never look back. But Megan was somewhere in this house. I could feel it. I gripped the screwdriver like a lifeline and started up the stairs. Each step groaned louder than the last, the sound echoing through the empty house. When I reached the second floor, the hallway stretched out in front of me like a tunnel, pitch black except for a faint light coming from one of the bedrooms at the end. My old bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, the light spilling out into the hallway. As I approached, I noticed something strange, a faint, rhythmic sound. It was a ticking, like an old clock. I pushed the door open and my heart nearly stopped. Megan was there, tied to the chair, just like in the videos. Her head was slumped forward, her hair covering her face. "Megan!" I ran to her, dropping the screwdriver and fumbling with the ropes that bound her wrists. "It's me. I'm here. I'm going to get you out." But as soon as I touched her, I realized something was wrong. Her skin was ice cold. I pulled her head back gently and the breath left my body. It wasn't Megan. It was a mannequin, a cheap plastic dummy dressed in her clothes, a wig taped to its head. I stumbled back, my chest heaving, as laughter echoed through the room. I spun around, but there was no one there. The ticking grew louder, more frantic, and I realized it was coming from beneath the chair. I crouched down and saw a small, blinking device taped to the underside. A bomb. I bolted out of the room, my legs barely working beneath me. I hit the stairs 2 at a time, nearly falling as the ticking reached a fever pitch. The second I hit the front door, the explosion rocked the house. I was thrown forward, landing hard on the gravel driveway. A deafening roar filled my ears as flames consumed the house, lighting up the night sky. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the fire, my mind blank. Then my phone buzzed. Through the ringing in my ears, I barely heard it, but I knew what it was. I pulled the phone from my pocket, my hands trembling. The screen was cracked, but the message was clear. "Game over. We'll be in touch." I don't know who they were. I don't know why they chose me or what they were trying to prove. All I know is this: Megan is still missing, and I'm still their pawn. The house is gone, Jason Cartwright's life is ruined, and my hands are stained with blood I'll never wash off. I don't sleep anymore. I keep waiting for the next text, the next job. Every shadow feels like it's watching me. If you're reading this, don't try to find me. Don't try to help. Because if they find out I told anyone, Megan really will be next, and I don't think I could survive that. Alright, so this is a story I never thought I'd share, but honestly, I don't know what else to do. It's been eating at me for weeks, and maybe if I write it down, I can at least make some sense of it, or warn someone else. Let me back up a bit. I'm not some shady person or anything, I swear. I'm just a 22-year-old guy who got in over his head. I live in a small apartment in downtown Chicago, juggling 2 part-time jobs that barely cover rent and groceries. You know the drill. Microwave dinners, endless YouTube, and scrolling through Reddit until 3 a.m. Anyway, a few months ago I was feeling desperate. My car broke down and the repairs were going to cost over $1,000. My landlord wasn't exactly understanding about late rent, and I was running out of options. That's when I started lurking on the sketchier corners of the internet. Don't judge me, it's easy to rationalize bad choices when you're broke and stressed out. I'd heard about the deep web from horror stories on Reddit and YouTube, and I got curious. I wasn't looking for anything illegal, just curious. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. One night I stumbled into this forum. It wasn't anything fancy, just a plain black page with a few threads in some weird language. But one of the titles was in English. Well, want to make quick cash? $2,000 easy. Now, I'm not stupid. I know scams when I see them, but something about it seemed different. The post was short and to the point. Need someone discreet to follow a person for 3 days. Details upon acceptance, payment up front, no questions asked. There was an email attached. Against my better judgment, I sent a message. I didn't use my real email, obviously. I made a burner Gmail and said something like, "Hey, I'm interested in the job. What's the deal?" I didn't expect a reply, but 20 minutes later, I got one. The email was chillingly simple. Follow the target. Record their movements. Report back daily. $2,000 in Bitcoin will be sent once the job is confirmed. Agree? I froze. My heart was pounding, but at the same time, I was tempted. $2,000 for following someone? It didn't feel real, but then they attached a Bitcoin wallet with a balance of, no joke, exactly $2,000. It was like they were dangling it in front of me saying, "Look, it's real, take the bait." And like an idiot, I did. The next email came with a photo and an address. The photo showed a young woman, probably in her mid-20s. She had dark hair, glasses, and this kind of nervous energy about her. She wasn't smiling, just staring at the camera like she didn't know it was being taken. The address was in Lincoln Park, about 30 minutes from my place. I Googled it, and it turned out to be a Starbucks. My instructions were clear: watch her from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., take note of where she went, and send updates to the email. It felt wrong. But at the same time, it didn't seem dangerous. I wasn't hurting anyone, right? Just watching. So the next day, I borrowed a car from a friend, drove to the Starbucks, and parked across the street. At 3 p.m. on the dot, she showed up. She ordered her drink, some complicated iced coffee, and sat by the window with a laptop. She didn't do anything unusual, just scrolled through her screen, typed a bit, and occasionally looked around like she was paranoid. I jotted everything down in a notebook, feeling like the world's worst spy. After an hour, she packed up and left. I followed her from a distance, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. She walked a few blocks to a small bookstore, browsed for a while, and left with a single paperback. Then she caught a bus and disappeared into the city. I emailed the details that night and got a quick reply. "Good work. Same time tomorrow." The second day was more of the same. She went to Starbucks, sat for a while, then wandered around. But something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, but then I noticed it. She kept looking over her shoulder like she knew someone was watching. Once, she even stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk and turned around. I ducked behind a parked car, my heart racing. That night, I got another email. "Final day tomorrow. Don't mess up." It felt like a threat, but I brushed it off. I was almost done. One more day, and I'd be $2,000 richer. On the third day, I arrived early and parked in my usual spot. But when she showed up, something was different. She wasn't alone. A man was with her, a tall guy in a black hoodie. They sat together at the Starbucks talking quietly, and I couldn't hear a word through the window. My stomach churned. When they left, I followed at a safe distance. They walked a few blocks, then stopped at an alley. The man looked around, then nodded at her. She disappeared into the alley, and he turned to face my car. My blood turned to ice. He was staring directly at me, his face hidden under the hoodie. Slowly, he raised a hand and pointed at me. I panicked. I threw the car into reverse and sped off, my heart pounding like a drum. When I got home, I checked my email, half expecting another message. Instead, I got nothing. Silence. But when I woke up the next morning, there was a new email waiting for me. It was a single sentence. "We know who you are." Attached was a photo of me, sitting in my car, watching the Starbucks. When I saw the email, my stomach dropped. The photo was crystal clear. Me, sitting in the driver's seat of my friend's beat-up Honda, holding my phone like a complete idiot. I hadn't even noticed anyone taking it. My first thought was that I'd been sloppy. Maybe the guy in the hoodie had seen me following them, but how had he gotten so close without me noticing? I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. I was about to delete the email when another one came in. This time, it was a video. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The clip was only about 10 seconds long. It was taken from the passenger seat of a car parked just down the street from my apartment. I could see my building, the crappy brick exterior, and the fire escape that led to my window. My window. The camera panned up to focus on it for a few seconds, then cut out. That was it. No message, no demands, just that. I scrambled to my feet and yanked the curtains shut. My hands were sweaty, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. Someone had been outside my place close enough to know exactly where I lived, and I had no idea who. I paced the room for what felt like hours, checking the locks on my door and windows over and over. Every little sound made me jump, a creak in the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, a car passing outside. I felt like a cornered animal. Eventually, I grabbed my laptop and logged into the burner email I'd been using. I fired off a message to the original address. "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" I didn't expect a reply, but within minutes they responded. "We told you not to mess up." I slammed the laptop shut and backed away like it was going to bite me. My mind was racing. Who were these people? Why was I being targeted? It was supposed to be a simple, stupid job, and now I felt like I was in the middle of some kind of nightmare. The thing is, I couldn't even go to the police. What was I supposed to say? "Hi, I agreed to stalk a stranger for $2,000 on the dark web, and now I think I'm being stalked instead." They'd arrest me before they even took me seriously. That night I barely slept. I sat in the dark with a baseball bat by my side, jumping at every sound. At some point, exhaustion must have taken over, because I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains I'd forgotten to close. For a second, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I'd freaked out for nothing. But then I saw the note. It was on the floor, just inside the front door, like someone had slipped it through the crack. A plain piece of paper with 4 words scrawled in black marker. "Look out your window." I froze. My whole body felt like it was made of lead. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. At first, I didn't see anything. Just the usual view of the street, cars parked along the curb, a couple of people walking their dogs. But then my eyes landed on something that didn't belong. Across the street, propped against a lamppost, was a cardboard cutout. It was me. A life-sized photo of me, the same picture they'd emailed the day before. The cutout was staring directly at my window, my own face grinning back at me in the most unsettling way. I stumbled back, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. My brain was screaming at me to call someone, anyone, but I didn't know who to trust. Instead, I did something stupid. I grabbed the baseball bat and marched outside. When I got to the lamppost, the cutout was gone. I stood there in the middle of the street, looking around like an idiot. No one was there. No cars, no people, nothing. It was like the whole street had emptied out the second I stepped outside. The silence was deafening. I ran back inside, slammed the door, and locked it behind me. When I turned around, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message. "We're closer than you think." It didn't make sense. I'd never given them my number. Hell, I'd never even used my real name. The burner email was completely separate from anything connected to me. At least, I thought it was. I turned my phone off, threw it on the couch, and started pacing again. My thoughts were racing a mile a minute. They knew where I lived. They had my number. They were watching me. But how? And then it hit me. The car. My friend's car had a dash cam. I didn't think much of it at the time, but if someone had gotten into the car while I was out following the woman, they could have planted something. A tracker, a microphone, anything. I grabbed my keys and bolted out the door, half expecting someone to jump out at me. When I got to the car, I practically tore it apart. I checked under the seats, in the glove compartment, even under the hood. Nothing. But when I got to the trunk, I found it. A small black device, about the size of a thumb drive, taped to the inside of the trunk lid. My stomach churned. It was a GPS tracker. I ripped it off and threw it as far as I could. But even as I stood there, breathing hard and trying to convince myself I'd fixed the problem, I knew it wasn't over. Whoever these people were, they were playing a game, and I was the pawn. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I didn't know it then, but the worst was yet to come. I didn't go back to my apartment after finding the tracker. Something about staying there felt like walking into a trap, so I drove around aimlessly for hours. The city felt different, emptier somehow, like it was holding its breath. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer, flickering as I passed under them. Every car I saw in my rearview mirror sent a jolt of panic through me. Were they following me, watching, or was I just losing it? Eventually, I ended up at an all-night diner on the edge of town. The kind of place with sticky booths and a neon sign that buzzes just loud enough to make you crazy. I ordered coffee I didn't want and sat in the corner, my back against the wall, trying to figure out what to do. My phone was still off, lying face down on the table. I was terrified to turn it on, but the silence was worse. If they were still watching me, I needed to know. I needed to know how much danger I was in. I took a deep breath and powered it on. For a second, nothing happened. No new messages, no missed calls. Just the regular home screen. I almost laughed at how paranoid I'd been, until the screen flashed. It wasn't a text this time. It was a video call. My heart stopped. The caller ID was blank, just a grey silhouette where a name should have been. I stared at it, my hands shaking, until the ringing stopped. A second later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Missed call. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Instead, I shoved the phone in my pocket and waved for the check. I needed to leave. Staying in one place for too long felt like a mistake. As I was paying, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text. We liked the diner. Nice choice. I dropped the receipt and ran to my car. When I got inside, I locked the doors and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying not to hyperventilate. How did they know where I was? Were they in the diner, watching from outside? I scanned the parking lot, but it was almost empty. Just a couple of parked cars and a guy smoking near the entrance. Then I noticed the camera. It was taped to my rearview mirror, small and barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Another device. Another way for them to watch me. I ripped it off and threw it out the window, but the damage was done. They'd been watching the whole time. I felt like I was suffocating, like no matter where I went, they'd find me. It didn't stop there. As I drove, the texts kept coming. Turn left at the next light. Don't miss the gas station on the corner. You look scared. Don't be. Every time I tried to shake them, they seemed to know exactly where I was going. I turned down random streets, doubled back, even parked in an empty lot for half an hour with the lights off. But it didn't matter, they were always a step ahead. At some point, I ended up on the highway heading out of the city. I didn't have a plan, I just wanted to put as much distance between me and whoever they were. About an hour later, I pulled into a rest stop. It was one of those isolated places with a couple of vending machines and bathrooms that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in years. There were no other cars, no people, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the endless stretch of road disappearing into the darkness. I parked as far from the building as I could and turned off the engine. For the first time in hours, it was quiet. I sat there in the dark, my head against the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. Maybe they'd finally lost me. Maybe I could just wait here until morning and figure out my next move. But then I saw it. At the edge of the parking lot, just barely visible in the glow of the rest stop's lights, was a figure. They were standing perfectly still, facing my car, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie. I froze. My brain screamed at me to start the car and get the hell out of there. But my body wouldn't move. I just sat there, staring at them, as they slowly raised their hand and pointed directly at me. The motion snapped me out of it. I turned the key and slammed the gas pedal, my tires screeching as I sped out of the lot. I didn't look back. I drove for miles without stopping, not even sure where I was going. Eventually, I ended up in a small motel off the highway, the kind of place that didn't ask questions if you paid in cash. The guy at the front desk barely looked at me as he handed over the key. The room was tiny and smelled like mildew, but it had a lock on the door, and that was good enough for me. I shoved a chair under the doorknob for good measure and collapsed onto the bed. For the first time, I felt like I was safe. But when I woke up, everything changed. There was a new email on my phone. No subject line, just a single attachment. A photo of me asleep in the motel bed. When I saw the photo, my body locked up. It was like my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. There I was, sprawled out on the motel bed, the chair still wedged under the doorknob in the background. Whoever had taken the picture had been inside the room with me. I didn't remember hearing the door open. I didn't remember anything. I must have been so exhausted that I passed out like a rock. But how could they have gotten in? I double-checked the locks. The chair was still there when I woke up. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. I bolted upright and scanned the room, half expecting someone to be hiding in the shadows watching me. Nothing. The room was empty. Then my phone buzzed again. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" I couldn't breathe. They were taunting me, showing me just how close they could get without me even knowing. My hands were trembling as I typed back, "What do you want from me?" The response came almost instantly. "You didn't follow instructions, that's a problem." I wanted to scream. The instructions? What instructions? They'd barely told me anything from the start. It was like they were playing some sick game, making up the rules as they went along just to mess with me. I was about to reply again when there was a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze, staring at the door like it might come alive. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like my chest would explode. Whoever it was didn't knock again. They just waited. I didn't move. Minutes passed, and the silence became unbearable. I crept toward the door as quietly as I could, trying not to let the floor creak beneath my feet. When I reached the peephole, I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I pressed my eye to the peephole, and my stomach dropped. The hallway was empty. I yanked the door open, ready to confront whoever was messing with me, but there was no one there. Just the flickering hallway light and the faint hum of the vending machine at the end of the corridor. Then I saw it. A piece of paper was taped to the door at eye level. It wasn't there when I checked the peephole, I was sure of it. My hands shook as I pulled it down and unfolded it. "Room 117, bring your phone." I didn't understand. Room 117? That was just a few doors down. Why would they want me to go there? What was waiting for me? I wanted to leave. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to grab my stuff and get out of there. But I couldn't. They were watching me, and I had no idea what they'd do if I ignored them. I slid my phone into my pocket and stepped into the hallway. It felt like the walls were closing in as I walked, my footsteps echoing against the worn carpet. Room 117 was at the very end, the door slightly ajar like it was inviting me in. I pushed it open with my foot, half expecting someone to jump out at me, but the room was empty. No lights, no furniture, just a bare mattress on the floor and the smell of damp wood. In the center of the room was a single object, a cheap flip phone sitting on the mattress, its screen glowing faintly in the darkness. I hesitated, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This felt wrong, worse than anything that had happened so far. But I couldn't stop myself. I stepped inside, grabbed the phone, and flipped it open. There was a text waiting on the screen. "Record yourself saying you're sorry." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. What the hell did they want? Sorry for what? Was this some kind of humiliation thing, or was it more than that? My fingers hovered over the keypad, but before I could type anything, the phone buzzed again. Now! My throat felt tight as I opened the camera app. The room's dim light cast long shadows across my face as I hit record. I'm sorry, I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to, the phone buzzed again, cutting me off. Louder. I swallowed hard and tried again. I'm sorry, I said, louder this time. I shouldn't have taken the job. Please, just leave me alone. The screen went black for a moment, and then a new message appeared. Leave the phone. Go back to your room. I dropped the flip phone like it was on fire and backed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back as I made my way down the hall, back to the safety, or illusion of safety, of my own room. When I got inside, I locked the door and shoved the chair back under the knob. My whole body was shaking as I collapsed onto the bed. I didn't know what to do anymore. Every move I made seemed to bring me deeper into their trap. And then, just as I was starting to calm down, my phone buzzed again. It was another photo. This time, it was a picture of the flip phone, still sitting on the mattress, but in the corner of the frame, barely visible in the shadows, was a pair of feet. Someone had been in the room with me, watching the whole time. I don't think I moved for a full minute after seeing that photo. My brain was trying to convince me it wasn't real, that the image on my screen wasn't what it looked like. But I knew the truth. Someone had been there, hidden in the shadows, just feet away from me. And now they wanted me to know it. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. I wanted to throw it, smash it, anything to make the connection between me and them disappear. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. They didn't need my phone to find me. They were already a step ahead. For a moment, I thought about running, just grabbing my keys and driving until I ran out of gas. But where would I go? They'd already proven they could follow me anywhere. Besides, I couldn't shake the feeling that leaving the motel was exactly what they wanted. Instead, I turned off the lights in my room and sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the baseball bat I'd brought in from my car. Every noise outside, footsteps, doors opening and closing, the faint hum of cars on the highway, set me on edge. Hours passed, nothing happened. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable, pressing in on me like a weight. Just as I was starting to think I might have imagined the whole thing, my phone buzzed again. The message was short. Time's up. Open the door. My breath hitched. The words didn't make sense. Why would they tell me to open the door? I hadn't heard anyone knock. For all I knew, it was another sick joke, a way to keep me on edge. But then I noticed the shadows under the door. Someone was standing there, motionless, their feet barely visible in the thin sliver of light from the hallway. My grip on the bat tightened, my palms slick with sweat. Whoever it was didn't knock. They just waited, their presence so unnervingly calm it made my skin crawl. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. After what felt like an eternity, the shadow shifted. Slowly, almost lazily, it moved away from the door, disappearing down the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was shaking the room. And then I heard it. A soft click from the lock. I froze. My mind raced, trying to process what just happened. How could they unlock the door? The chair was still wedged under the knob, but somehow it didn't feel like enough. I stood up, my legs shaking, and pressed my back against the wall next to the door, clutching the bat like it was the only thing keeping me alive. The door didn't open. Instead, a folded piece of paper slipped under the crack. I stared at it for a long time, too scared to pick it up. It just sat there, taunting me, daring me to see what it said. Eventually, I worked up the courage to crouch down and grab it. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. "We're waiting." The paper fell from my hands and I stumbled back, my breathing shallow. I didn't know what to do anymore. They weren't just following me, they were controlling me, pushing me into some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And then, almost like clockwork, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text, it was a live video. Against every instinct, I opened it. The screen showed a dark, cramped space. It took me a second to realize it was my car, the back seat to be exact. The camera was angled low, pointed at something on the floor. At first, I couldn't tell what I was looking at. It just looked like a crumpled pile of clothing. But as the camera panned closer, I saw it. A body. My stomach turned, and I dropped the phone, backing away like it might explode. The image was burned into my mind, the pale hand sticking out from under the fabric, the faint glint of something metallic near the body's head. A gun? A knife? I didn't want to know. The phone buzzed again, vibrating on the floor where I'd dropped it. I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. A knock at the door shattered the silence. It wasn't slow or deliberate this time. It was frantic, like someone was pounding their fist against the wood. I jumped, the bat slipping from my sweaty hands. "Open up!" a voice shouted. It wasn't the calm, taunting tone from the texts. It was desperate, almost panicked. "Please, you have to let me in." For a second, I thought it might be someone who could help me, but then I remembered the photo, the feet in the shadows, the body in my car. "Who are you?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "They're coming!" the voice shouted. "They're right behind me. Please, you have to let me in." I didn't move. My whole body was frozen, every nerve screaming at me not to trust them. And then, just like before, the knocking stopped. Silence. I waited, holding my breath, listening for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. I crept toward the door, my hands shaking, and peeked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty corridor, trying to convince myself it was safe. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. When I finally turned away, my phone buzzed one last time. The message was simple: game over. Before I could even process what it meant, the lights in the room flickered and went out. And then I heard the door creak open behind me.